Hello, thank you for joining us. We are getting started and really happy that you've joined this ThinkShop on 5 ways to maximize revenue for your online store. So thanks again for joining. As you have questions during our event, please feel free to add them into the Q&A tab that you see. And I am excited to introduce myself. My name's Kate Sheridan. I'm Director of Product Marketing at Bolt, and I'm joined today by Andrew Sommer and Jeremy Moser, and we're going to go into introductions in just a second. And apologies that we're having a little difficulty with Jeremy's camera today, so we'll do our best to see if we can fix that, but I'm sorry, with Andrew's camera today, but we will at least have Andrew's picture so you can see that in the meantime while we are working on that. So as we're going to spend about 40 minutes today together and talk about the 5 best ways that you can maximize revenue with your online store. So we have seen in reports that average conversion rate for e-commerce is around 2.65%, pretty low. So if you want to grow your e-commerce sales and you have those low conversion rates, really optimization of your online store versus trying to get more traffic is a great thing to focus on for success. So in today's masterclass, we're going to cover those top 5 ways to make your online store as attractive as possible to buyers so you can really drive those e-commerce sales. So as I mentioned, our speakers today, we have Andrew Sommer, who is an e-commerce growth coach at BigCommerce, and he helps merchants learn the platform and optimize their sites for conversion and SEO. And we have Jeremy Moser, who's the co-founder and CEO of uSERP, which is a performance-driven digital PR and SEO agency. So a big welcome to Andrew and Jeremy. And I'd love for you each to tell us a little more about yourself. And Andrew, we will start with you. Andrew, we can't hear you. Let's go to Jeremy. Andrew's having some technical issues. So let's start with you, Jeremy.
Awesome. Yeah. Hey, everyone. Great to be here. I'm Jeremy Moser. I run uSERP, which is, as Kate mentioned, an SEO strategy and digital PR consultancy serving venture-funded SaaS and e-commerce companies. We're a team of about 30 plus people spread across the United States, Canada, Europe, and more. I also write about SEO and content marketing for publications like Entrepreneur, Search Engine Journal, and often share more candid thoughts on platforms like Twitter. So yeah, looking forward to diving into some ways to maximize revenue for your online store together.
Awesome. Fantastic. What about Andrew?
Now?
Yes, we can hear
awesome.
you.
Awesome. Glad to be here. Sorry, y'all, for my technical issues. Some issues with the camera and now the microphone, since the microphone's working. Yeah, like Kate said, I'm an e-commerce growth coach, right? My job over here at BigCommerce is one, get merchants where they're able to launch their store, and then once they're on our platform, help them optimize their store both for SEO and conversion, right? So that's kind of where I am, right? And I love diving into this stuff and discussing it with merchants like yourself to figure out what we can do to better optimize your store. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you both for joining us. Great to have your expertise here. So let's dive into our 5 ways to optimize your site. So first is optimizing e-commerce SEO. So we know that search engine optimization is crucial for getting shoppers and interested shoppers to your site. And this is a great high value tactic. So I'd love to start, Jeremy, first with you to walk us through the importance of SEO and some tips for folks on how they can improve what they currently have.
Yeah, absolutely. So optimizing your store for search engines and then subsequently users is a really great way to drive more revenue while also building, a nice, memorable brand in the process. So let's really start, from the top level down at the most base level of why is SEO important for e-commerce, why you should care about some of this. So search engines are really first and foremost one of the most frequent places we go to solve problems. And often, a product is that final solution to a problem. So it makes it a really key channel to capture demand. The beauty of search engines and SEO for e-commerce is that SEO is really all about capturing that existing demand. And so people are out there right now on a daily basis searching for products that you probably sell. And with the right strategy, content analysis, all these factors working together, you can get directly in front of your ideal buyers without having to pay for each subsequent click over time as those rates increase, right? And so now SEO isn't free. You need to have a plan and strategize and create all of the content. But the real beauty of SEO is that a single well-optimized page or blog post can really bring in a lot of revenue for years to come, giving you a big compounding effect over time. So some of the biggest wins that you're going to see with your online store for SEO is going to be those product category pages where you're trying to rank for something like, let's say vitamins for cats, or even more broad, just like vitamins in general, right? And so this is going to be obviously a page that's listing all of your products in a given category. And these are really quite competitive. You'll likely see brands out there like Amazon, obviously. They're going to have a lot of category pages ranking in your space. But the goal here is, we want to be competitive with those. We want your brand to be ranking within those top 5, 7 search results around a given category page. And so how do you possibly compete with Amazon? How do you compete with these maybe larger brands in your space? I typically recommend your focus to be in 3 distinct buckets that we can kind of cover here. So the number one is going to be anything around the technical optimization of your site. So this is really baseline stuff that you need to have covered to make sure things like your site is fast, so the speed is up to date, you're loading in just a few seconds versus having super large images that maybe make the site very slow and unresponsive. You want your information architecture to be really structured. So anything that someone's clicking on, like the headers, you want that to be very clear, both from a content standpoint, right, of making sure your blog posts align, that they're categorized correctly, that your product pages are aligned properly. Everything from that to internal linking and kind of doing the boring work like adding alt tags to your images can be really impactful over time. And so in addition to those, for your online store, you really want to add things like pricing, review schema to your product pages. These will show up in search results, so they'll give you a really nice boost in your click-through rate overall, which is sending really positive signals to Google and search engines that, okay, this is a really good product, it's a good product page, and it's going to drive some of those future clicks. So that's kind of the technical foundation that you want to set there to make sure that, obviously, kind of like Kate mentioned earlier, if you're driving traffic to your site, you want to make sure you're converting the most of that traffic so you don't have to consistently either pay to get more traffic that's going to convert at a lower rate or continually publish thousands and thousands of pieces of content. And so we typically see that as that's going to be your first big win, is really driving a lot of that increase in conversion rates from being a really strong technical site. Now, the second bucket that I tend to see here as being really impactful is on-page content. So things like your category pages, maybe it's even informational content where you can inform potential future buyers. So on these pages, your goal is not just to have an endless scroll of products, but to provide content to both potential buyers and search engines around the category as a whole. So the key here is finding balance, right? Like we want to avoid becoming a recipe blog here. I'm sure you all know the pain of going to search a recipe, reading through thousands of words just to find the actual instructions. We want to avoid frustrating users at all costs by giving too dense of information. This can really lead to increased bounce rates. You're going to see lower conversion rates overall, and you're going to get some of those negative on-page signals. So the balance you really want to strike here is, how do I have a strong hero section? So the section that someone sees just above the fold, just below the fold of the website, where you can add something like a really great product image in action, maybe add a few quick paragraphs that provide context to what the page contains, right? So why is your product the best in the space? What kind of problem do you solve with the product? And how does that relate to what they're doing as a whole? And then from there, really just dive straight into your products, list them out. And this is where you want to keep text surrounding your products to a minimum. You want to avoid too much of a dense description, because as I mentioned, you don't want to make people have to search for your products or hunt for them. You want to just provide that context up front and then share a lot of those great products in the middle. And then at the bottom stages is really where you can capitalize more on even more dense content without causing too much of a bad user experience. So I recommend doing this with something like an FAQ or a Q&A dropdown. If you're more technical oriented, it's often called like an accordion dropdown. It's essentially a collapsible FAQ section where it doesn't cause that endless scroll that can create really poor online experiences, but also gives you information and a chance to list a lot of relevant questions. And so if you're not sure where to go from there or what to include in an FAQ like that, what we see as being a big, easy win here is really searching for your broad category. So let's say that your category is about gardening tools. Go to Google right now and just search for something like gardening tools and look at that people also ask box. This is going to be a lot of questions that your potential customers are already searching for. So you can do less legwork and less guesswork and just see exactly what they're already searching for and include those within your FAQ. So by doing that, you're really tailoring a lot of that content to not only search engines and kind of serving that intent, but you're also helping folks out right in the process of them deciding, is this the right product for me? How is this valuable for me? And all those kind of good things that make them convert on some of your content. And then in terms of sort of the off-page side of things, this is really where you're looking at things like backlinks, brand mentions. How do you get your brand out there in the press, media, relevant publications to where you can kind of capitalize on driving really qualified traffic back to your site? So just to go to the base level, right? Backlinks are basically hyperlinked text pointing from one domain back to yours. So, if you're selling a product, you want to get that product mentioned in a third-party website and a really relevant article so that you're driving a lot of those key signals, both for search engines, but also people obviously coming back to your site and buying. And so links to your online store really tend to serve three main goals. Number one being, obviously, more links coming back to your site is very valuable for improving your rankings across the board. So things like competitive category pages where, as I mentioned, you might be going head-to-head against Amazon for that category. You want to make sure that you're getting a lot of relevant links back to that category page that's signaling, okay, this content is valuable, these products are really trusted, they're well-known, they're well-received in the market. Number two is going to be, backlinks are going to position you directly in front of your high-intent shoppers. So things like getting your products mentioned, featured, even your brand as a whole, and being able to build your brand over time. So one platform I really recommend if you have that extra time to check out is something like helpareporterout.com. You can go to Twitter and look at the hashtag journal requests, and these kind of areas allow you to connect with really big publishers, magazines, get in front of those folks to where you have the chance to either promote directly your products and talk about why they're so great, or what you're doing differently than competitors. It can also give you a chance to just build your personal brand as a whole too, that it enables you to drive more really high converting traffic to your store. And then lastly, obviously, we can't forget about things like conversion, right? So like content for the purpose of search engine rankings and capturing demand should really serve all forms of conversions, and that might not necessarily be just products at first. So as an e-com store, you really want to start capturing things like high intent emails. Obviously, this can be a really game-changing aspect for your sales team. And a fantastic way to do this is really serve customers at every stage of their journey. And so this is really where a lot of content creation comes into play. And it's something you can do directly with SEO-driven content. So this means, for example, let's take that gardening tools example again. If you're selling a bunch of different gardening tools, your objective might be to rank organically for top of the funnel informational stuff. So let's say how to get started with gardening, how to create a backyard garden, any topics around that, you should seek to be creating really valuable, helpful guides for potential customers in the future to reference here. On those guides, you can then add upgrades or ebooks, guides, discounts, things that are going to help you retain a lot of the traffic that's coming in so that you can potentially sell them at a later date while you're also building a lot of that brand awareness over time. So that's really, as I mentioned, where I would focus those main SEO efforts overall.
Mm-hmm. Wow, thank you so much, Jeremy. That's so comprehensive, and I was taking some notes, and I think that's really helpful for the audience. Andrew, would love to hear what you have to add about how retailers can optimize their SEO. We can't hear you yet. Maybe we're back to that previous setting. All right, well, we can come back to you, Andrew, when you get your audio figured out, but let's move on to our second tip, which is a really great one about mobile ease of use. So we want to make sure that you're prioritizing that mobile approach, because 72% of e-commerce sales are on mobile. I find that really incredible. What a big outsized amount. And the challenge is that mobile conversion rates lag far behind desktop. So let's start with you, Jeremy, on how can merchants improve their site's mobile strategy?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the first baseline starting point that you need on a mobile strategy is really all about speed, right? We want to make sure that usability is very high on your site. So you want to make sure things like even the smallest little details like your font size can really make a big difference on how people perceive the experience, their readability, how do you create that really nice user experience overall. So for something more tactical like your font size, you want to make sure that's around 12 point, which tends to be about 16 pixels. That's about the optimal size recommendation directly from Google in terms of what is the best and most effective readability. So even these small kind of details can really add up over time. And then in terms of speed, you obviously want to compress your images as much as possible without losing kind of that magic that you get with really nice product shots. So obviously you don't want to, compromise too much there, and speed is not the end all be all, but you want to make sure that obviously your site is not taking 10, 15 seconds to load each time someone clicks on something. If it takes just a few seconds to load, that's more than okay. And we want those product shots to be great too. Another tip there too is, adding any breadcrumbs that you can on mobile that shows kind of a scent trail, so to speak, of where users are searching within. It's a really good way to optimize the mobile experience that you often find on desktop, but you sometimes don't see carry over to mobile. Obviously, because there's less screen real estate, menus are a little more difficult. But if you can add something like a breadcrumb on that mobile product page, so for example, if a user is looking at like women's t-shirts, you want to show that linear progression of them going from clothing to women's to t-shirts so that they know exactly where they are on your site and how to quickly navigate back for a nice experience.
Great, really appreciate those insights. Andrew, are you able to unmute and share how merchants can improve mobile strategy? Oh, I'm seeing that he's still having some challenges. Okay, we will keep going to our third tip around user-generated content. So compared to regular promotional content, 90% of consumers find that user-generated content is more influential. So, Jeremy, I'm curious, how do you think retailers should approach their UGC strategy?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a really good question. UGC is really kind of the holy grail of e-commerce content, right? Coming from an SEO background, one of my favorite ways to just create more, better, relevant content for an e-commerce site is leveraging any of that user-generated content that you can from your existing audience. So not only does this add to, things like your content depth on page, it also provides more value for real readers to see your products in action, recommended by others, and really can solidify that brand trust overall. So it's a great way to just create more top of the funnel content, informational content at scale for your store versus maybe going out and spending a lot of time vetting writers. You can also do that in combination with your UGC to then create really impactful pieces over time that you're already leveraging some of that existing work that's being done by your audience. So for example, let's say you're selling again in that gardening niche, and a customer of yours, maybe they create a YouTube video about how they're using your product. Maybe it's the gardening gloves or whatever they're buying from you. And that's the perfect video to embed on a blog post on your site about, how to use gardening gloves that'll drive really hyper relevant traffic to your site. You're going to get the benefit there of both written and video content without a massive budget for maybe creating your own in-house tutorials, videos, things like that. So the more that you can encourage video, we see that's just one of the best forms of UGC overall, mainly because it just has so many compounding distribution effects, right? So for example, with video, you can cut that up into smaller videos and distribute that on places like TikTok or Instagram Reels. Maybe you transcribe that video into a more longer form blog post that details how they're using the product or one of the benefits and features. You can also obviously add those directly to things like your product pages, category pages, even use direct quotes from those videos as social proof. So when you're going the UGC route, I highly recommend trying to incentivize as much as possible for your audience to really create videos around the product, as the compounding effects of that are just much greater than things like a standard quote or maybe even just an image itself.
Mm-hmm. Great, super helpful. Andrew, we can see you, and I think you're able to unmute. We'd love to hear your take on user-generated content.
Yeah, sorry about that, Kate, and everyone else. I think I got it figured out, at least for now, right?
Yeah,
I think Jeremy has given a lot of good quality information there, right? I think when I'm looking at products, from a personal standpoint, I take into consideration a lot more of user-generated content as far as what other people are saying about the product, right? And things like that, rather than what the person trying to sell the product is saying, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of those trust factors there when it comes to user-generated content. And when other people are talking about your product or, creating content for your product, it's going to give the rest of your customer base or people browsing, searching for those products a lot more trustworthiness into your product and more likely to buy, convert, and all that good stuff. Right.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think the other piece is think about what you need out of the content. Like if the product needs to be demonstrated, that could be great for something like TikTok. So what's the channel and platform you want it to be used on? And also as you're getting this user-generated content, how do you make the most out of it, sharing it on your social channels, putting it into your other content like blogs and emails?
Yeah. Right. And I think that omni-channel can be very important for that. It's kind of, rolling all your different platforms and devices into one and being
Mm-hmm.
consistent on all those different platforms, right? If you're posting to TikTok, Twitter, Facebook, what have you.
Exactly. Yeah. Keeping your brand consistent. So you're showing up in that similar look and feel, and your shoppers are seeing that message amplified everywhere they go.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. I think UGC is really a core practice that most e-commerce retailers should implement. It just allows you, especially on smaller budgets too, if you don't have a massive, venture funding to scale up a lot of content, you can leverage your existing audience, you can tap into them, you can promote them and excite them about creating content around your brand and your products that, again, you can cut up, distribute, repurpose on so many different channels. That really allows you to just capture even more traffic from that without necessarily having a massive budget in place.
Mm-hmm. Great. All right, our fourth tip, all about analytics. So I know I'm a big fan of making decisions based on data whenever possible, but sometimes it can be challenging to get your hands on the data. So that is a big part of setting yourself up for success with your tech and analytics stack. So would love to hear, I think first from you, Andrew, around how do you recommend that folks use analytics to make those informed decisions?
Yeah. So, I mean, there's plenty of analytic tools out there, right? When we're talking free tools, I really think the Google Analytics is probably one of the best free tools out there. It's kind of gives you most of the information you need to make good decisions, right? It's not going to make the decision for you, but what it's going to do is provide you the information so that you can make the decisions, right? And depending on your business and your customer base, those decisions are going to be different, right? If you go deep into Google Analytics, you can see all kinds of different information, as far as, typical age, of your consumers or of your customers, or might depend on, your age, their age, or is going to depend on how you optimize your store, right? So if you trend younger, certain payment options like a Bolt or a digital wallet like Apple Pay or Google Pay is going to be highly beneficial, right? Because those younger the younger audience tends to gravitate more towards those. Where if we're looking older audiences, for example, I see, I know we talk about Google a lot when it comes to SEO and that types of stuff. But if you're trending older, right, 65 plus, 55 plus, a lot of those people are using Microsoft computers, and they use the native browser that is on their computer, which happens to be Microsoft Edge, which automatically goes to Bing. So like if you have an older demographic, you need to think about these things of how to optimize your, not only your store, but how you kind of go after those customers, right? So you might be more likely to advertise on Bing if you're 55 plus, where if you're under 40, probably looking more towards Google and that type of thing, right? And more on that, you can kind of see, what browsers, what devices people are using. We talked about the optimization of mobile earlier. You can get all that data just inside of the free program of Google Analytics. So I hope we're on there for all the customers with sites out there, and I hope y'all are using that information to your advantage. Be very helpful. Okay.
Absolutely. Jeremy, what about you? How do you recommend using analytics for more informed decisions?
Yeah, I think Andrew really hit the nail on the head with using Google Analytics as at least your kind of baseline there to see, okay, especially where are people coming in, what's the most impactful content that's really driving traffic to your site is a great way to see too, what's converting best in terms of our audience fit. What kind of topics did we maybe think from the get-go or our first impression that would convert the best maybe aren't actually converting very well. So you can get some really key data and insights there, especially on maybe where folks are dropping off, where they're bouncing, falling out of your funnel as well. You can see, especially in Google Analytics, kind of that content flow, which will give you an example of, okay, these folks came in from organic search and they might have a different path to converting on your site than someone that's coming in from ads, right? So it's really key to look at your analytics in those different silos and see how different people engage with your content based on where they're coming from in the first place. And that'll vary heavily between, obviously, if you're running a really high conversion-based ad, they might just go straight to a landing page. But if they're coming in organically from an SEO perspective, you're really looking to see what are those entry touch points, how can we get them to stay longer, maybe convert on a softer close like an email sign up or a newsletter or a discount code versus trying to funnel them straight into a product or category page. So Google Analytics has a lot of those key reports, and that's usually where I recommend that most people start at.
Great, very helpful. So we are on to our last strategy. So this is one of my favorites. So improving conversion in your checkout. We know that it's crucial to optimize pre-purchase and post-purchase, but you're going to have a lot of trouble increasing conversion if you aren't focusing on that place where your shoppers are making purchases, which is checkout. So Jeremy, we'll start with you on tips that you have for an ideal checkout experience.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the first point in this slide is really important, obviously, that you have a fast, secure checkout, not only from obviously a search engine standpoint, right? We want to make sure our sites are secure so that when there are shoppers there, their information is protected and this is clear. If you don't have that, you're just not going to rank organically in search results anymore. And so it's a really key aspect, obviously, that your site is secure. So that's really the baseline there that we want to see. Yeah, and secondarily, when it comes to an ideal checkout experience, you want to make sure the flow of information remains really consistent from someone adding that to their cart. It should give you, or the user or the buyer, a clear indication of what they just added on the checkout page, any breadcrumb information that they might have so that if they do want to continue shopping or go look back in that category, they're not faced with a really difficult user experience, right? So if they're in their cart and they see, clothing, women, t-shirts, they want to be able to go back and click and say, okay, let me search and see if I can shop for more in this category. Instead of having to maybe go back to their original Google search, or maybe they got there from your header menu, make it super easy for someone to be able to click back to that category page and add more to their cart, right? You just want to incentivize as clear of a path and an ease of use for someone. In addition, I really like testing variables like multi-step checkout experiences, where if you are that type of vendor that you might require more information upfront for a checkout, you can do these in smaller bits to really hook folks in and lower that barrier to converting. If you can, obviously having that one-click checkout is the gold standard, but there are some vendors out there, maybe you have a specific way, or maybe you do stuff that's a little more on the wholesale side of things and you need more information. Always consider trying to test those multi-step checkouts. Those tend to perform really well overall.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that ability to test and learn what works. And I think that theme of how do you make the experience as easy and frictionless for the shopper, that really resonates. What about you, Andrew? What tips do you have for improving the checkout experience?
Yeah, piggybacking on what y'all said, right? We want to make it as easy as possible once they get to checkout, right? I feel like once you get a customer to checkout, you've done most of the heavy lifting, right? So the last thing you want to do is scare them off on that last step, right? So there's all different kinds of ways, that we can make it easier for the customer. I know I work with some merchants that say you have to have an account to check out, right? That's a lot of people out there don't want to create accounts on every single website that they buy from. So that can, cause, a negative effect on your conversion rates if you make them create an account. Things like, like a bolt, a bolt can really increase it, just because I know there's sometimes when I'm shopping and I'm just lazy. I don't want to walk across the house and get my credit card or whatever it is. So, if they had something like Bolt or Apple Pay or Google Pay or something like that, I would have checked out. But I just left and didn't come back to it, right? So we're just trying to make it as easy as possible. When you have forms to fill out on checkout, we don't want to put any extra information in there. I've seen some people, require phone numbers on checkout, things like that. I'm pretty protective of my phone number. So if someone asks me that question, I'm kind of like, I'm going to get out of here and buy this somewhere else. So just make it as easy as possible, right? We want to put a minimal amount of barriers from when they get to that checkout page to when they actually press that add, place order button there. Just make it as easy as possible for them and kind of put yourself in their shoes, right? If there's something on your checkout page that you wouldn't want to do, odds are a lot of other people have that same process, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think the ability to offer that seamless one-click experience is that gold standard, and it's for a number of reasons and that you both touched on. But I think that piece that you don't want an account on every single little site that you have is very true. And for us, and what we're focused on at Bolt is giving retailers that ability to give their shoppers one-click checkout without a special account for your site, but with that universal account that works across the board. And I think we had a question in the chat earlier about, how does that work security-wise? But it is authenticated and it's bank level security. So you get the best of both worlds, where it's easy and frictionless for your shoppers, where they don't have to remember a password. It's all authenticated with the shopper's email or phone number, with that one-time password that's sent and texted or emailed to you. So you don't have to create that account, but you do get that personalized experience in that relationship. And I think that's what we're seeing as a big trend these days, that the winners in this really challenging e-commerce environment are those that have built relationships with their shoppers. And that opens up so much like personalization, not making shoppers have to type in their information over and over, not feeling like, oh, I have to share my phone number and being worried about that. And then for you as a retailer, getting more and more shopper accounts so that you're able to know who your shoppers are and tailor their experience accordingly and really exceed those expectations. So a big opportunity. So I'd love to wrap up with some takeaways that we've had from today's discussion. So a lot of hopefully actionable tips for how you can maximize revenue. Really starting with focusing on how often you're converting your visitors to boost your conversions and your revenue. And it's not just about growing the overall traffic to your site, but to optimize your site and optimize your checkout. And hopefully you've seen today that these enhancements, a lot of them are easier than you think. Some of them, like we talked a lot about Google Analytics, that is free. And some of these small changes can show that uptick in your revenue. So I'd love, Andrew, Jeremy, for each of you to share any last recommendations and takeaways you had from our discussion.
Yeah, absolutely. I think especially on kind of the content and SEO side of things, when we're looking at, like Kate said, it's not always about trying to get as much traffic as possible, but it's really how do we get the right visitors to our site that are ready for our product, that are going to convert. And I think that's really the key takeaway of an SEO approach to e-commerce is how do I rank around these keywords that are genuinely going to help my target audience versus let me just write content to get as much traffic as possible. And think when you're coming at it from that perspective, you tend to just create more valuable content in the first place, and you can optimize given sections of your site around your product pages that are really high intent. So adding those things like pricing, review schema can really help your products rank higher in search results. It can help you drive more click-through rate too, because you're just providing more high quality contextual information there. And then really taking that off-page approach to things where you're not just doing optimizations on your own site, you're also looking out there of how can I get press mentions, how can I get in relevant magazines, publications, or maybe even I don't have the traffic yet to my store, right? But these other media sites, they probably already do. And so you can really capitalize on their existing audience where there's a nice overlap to see some really strong results.
Yeah, and as far as SEO goes, right, I think Jeremy is alluding to this, right? We got to really think about the keywords that we're going after, right? And think of the buyer intent when it comes to SEO. Like I tend to use buy a car experience if you're shopping for a car a lot as an example, right? If you are selling cars, you're selling pickup trucks, and you go everything for pickup truck, right? You got to think of the person that's going to be searching for that, right? Someone that's searching pickup truck is probably not likely to actually buy a pickup truck when they're searching that. They're just looking for information. Where if you use a lot more tailored, keyword specific Ford pickup truck, blue, 2018, under 30,000 miles, right? They know what they want to buy, and they are pretty much ready to buy it. They're just looking for that product that they want to buy, right? So I think it's very important to put yourself kind of in the buyer's shoes of what they're going to do, and all these kinds of things, and use analytics for that. Make it as easy as possible, right? I think one of the good advantages of Bolt compared to some other one-click checkouts like Google Pay and Apple Pay is you would have to set up 2 or 3 one-click checkouts to really cover all your bases as far as browsers and devices go. Something like Bolt should do that for all your devices, right? So you don't have to set up 3 of them. You only have to set up one, which makes it a lot easier for you and for the customer, right? So yeah, I mean, use your information to make quality decisions, right? And just optimize for both conversion and SEO.
Wonderful. Thank you both for these insights. I hope that everyone found this really helpful. I know I was taking a lot of notes and found some really great tips. So thank you everyone for joining us and for engaging, and really appreciate the time, everyone, and have a great rest of your day.
Yeah, thanks everyone.
Yeah, thank you.